I want to tell you something about death that physics has established clearly, that almost nobody discusses in public, and that changes the question in a specific and precise way. Death is not what you think it is. Not in the sense that there is an afterlife, or that consciousness survives the body, or that any of the traditional religious consolations are confirmed by physics. They are not. Physics says nothing about whether consciousness continues after the death of the brain. That question sits in territory physics cannot reach in the relationship between neural processes and subjective experience, which is the hard problem of consciousness and which remains one of the most contested questions in philosophy and neuroscience. What physics does say precisely, mathematically, experimentally confirmed by a century of measurements that include atomic clocks on aircraft, muons from cosmic ray showers, and particle accelerators that push protons to within a fraction of a percent of the speed of light is this: the person you were yesterday has not ceased to exist. The person you will be in 10 years has not yet come into existence. The person you are right now will not, at the moment of your death, be annihilated from the universe. All those people, the you of yesterday, the you of today, the you of 10 years from now, and the you at the moment of your death, exist at their respective space-time coordinates in the four-dimensional block universe. They are all equally real. None of them are more real than any of the others. And the you of yesterday cannot be made to not exist by anything that happens today. This is not metaphor. It is not poetry. It is not spiritual consolation dressed in scientific language. It is a direct consequence of the block universe picture that emerges from special relativity, the same framework that predicted time dilation and was confirmed in the Haefele-Keating experiment, in muon lifetime measurements, in particle accelerator physics, and in the GPS satellite corrections that make your phone's navigation system accurate. The block universe is not a philosophical add-on to special relativity. It is the natural ontological interpretation of the mathematics that special relativity requires. In the previous video, I described the block universe in detail. Let me briefly reconstruct the argument here, because the claim about death depends on it. Special relativity establishes the relativity of simultaneity. Two observers in relative motion disagree about which events are simultaneous. An event that I call right now, occurring across the galaxy, might be in the past or the future for an observer moving relative to me at even a small fraction of the speed of light. The specific calculation is precise. For events at 10 billion light years distance, an observer moving at 1% of the speed of light has a right now that is 100 million years different from mine. If there is no universal right now, no single moment that is now for all observers simultaneously, then the division of events into past, present, and future is observer dependent. It is not a feature of the universe itself, but a feature of the perspective of a specific observer. The universe does not itself divide into past, present, and future. It is a four-dimensional space-time block in which all events exist at their space-time coordinates, without any event being privileged as more real than others by virtue of being in the present. This is the block universe. Every event at every space-time coordinate is equally real. The events of your past exist at their space-time coordinates. The events of your future exist at their space-time coordinates. The events of lives that have ended exist at their space-time coordinates. The events of lives not yet begun will exist at their space-time coordinates when they occur. The block is complete, containing all events that have occurred and all events that will occur, and it is not changing or evolving. The sense of change, of things becoming and passing, is a feature of the observer's worldline traversing the block, not a feature of the block itself. The standard picture of death is something like this. There is a person, call them you, who exists continuously from birth to death. That person is alive during the interval between birth and death. At the moment of death, that person ceases to exist. They are gone. Whatever they were, whatever experiences they had, Whatever they knew and felt and thought, all of it is extinguished. The universe continues, but they are no longer in it. This picture has an implicit assumption built into it, that existence is something that happens in the present moment and only in the present moment. The person exists right now in the present. When death comes, right now, for that person will no longer be happening, and so they will no longer exist. But the block universe undermines this assumption at its foundation. In the block universe, the present moment is not the criterion for existence. All events at all space-time coordinates exist with equal ontological status. The present moment is simply the current location of your world line, the event on your world line that you are currently traversing. Other events on your world line, including the events of your past and the events of your future, exist at their space-time coordinates just as surely as the present moment exists at its coordinates. When you die, your world line ends. The causal chain that connects your past experiences to your future experiences, the biological processes that maintain your neural architecture and your sense of continuous self, are permanently terminated. No new events are added to your world line. The future that would have been yours does not occur on your world line. Those coordinates in space-time are empty where your presence might have been. But the world line that has been traversed does not cease to exist. The events of your life, every experience, every memory, every moment of joy and grief and understanding are fixed at their space-time coordinates in the block. They exist there permanently in the only sense that any event can be said to exist permanently. They are part of the complete space-time structure of the universe, and nothing that happens subsequently can unmake them. The physical understanding of death through the lens of the block universe is that your world line ends. Your future experiences stop. This is a genuine loss, and I do not want to minimize it. The potential experiences of a life cut short are a real absence in the block, events that do not exist at the coordinates where they might have been. But the events that did occur, the life that was lived, are not lost. They exist at their space-time coordinates. They are as real right now as they were when they were being experienced. The experience of being 5 years old, playing on a summer afternoon, is at its space-time coordinates right now, in the complete four-dimensional block, just as real as the moment you are reading these words. This is not a small claim. It is a radical reconception of what it means for a person to cease to exist. In the standard picture, death removes a person from the universe. In the block universe picture, death ends a person's world line, stopping the accumulation of new space-time coordinates, but does not remove from the universe the coordinates that have been accumulated. A useful physical analogy: consider a world line as a curve in the four-dimensional space-time manifold. If you draw a line on a piece of paper and then stop drawing, the line does not vanish. The portion that has been drawn remains. It is there, on the paper, at the coordinates where it was drawn. Beginning the line is birth, stopping is death. But stopping the line does not erase the line that exists. The line is a real feature of the paper, independent of whether the pen is currently moving. In the block universe, death is the cessation of new experience, not the annihilation of the experience that has occurred. The life that was lived is not made to have not happened by the death that follows it. The block universe does not allow events to be retroactively unmade. Ready to change how you see the world? The implications of the block universe for how we understand death are exactly the kind of insight that the 12 principles in my book are designed to illuminate. Physics changes not just what we know, but how we live in light of what we know. Get your copy of 12 Principles for Understanding the Fabric of Reality at realityprinciples.com. Let me now develop this more carefully, because the claim is specific enough to deserve precise treatment, and because there are ways in which the block universe picture does and does not change the situation. What the block universe does not do is provide consciousness after death. The block universe says that the events of your life persist at their space-time coordinates. It does not say that the experience of those events continues. The experience of being 5 years old happened at its space-time coordinates. It is there in the block. But the experience is not currently happening. It is located in the past at coordinates that your worldline has already traversed. You are not currently experiencing being 5 years old. You experience it then at those coordinates, and that experience is permanently at those coordinates. But it is not an ongoing experience. The distinction between an event existing in the block and an experience being currently felt is important. In the block universe, both are real. The event at its space-time coordinates and the experience associated with the event are real features of the block. But they are located at specific space-time coordinates, not at the present moment. The permanence of past events in the block is not the same as the ongoing experience of those events. What the block universe does provide is a specific answer to the question of whether a person who has died has been annihilated from the universe. The answer in the block universe is no. The events of their life are in the block. They are not gone. They are at their space-time coordinates, as real as ever. The person, understood as the collection of events and experiences that constitute their life, is not absent from the universe. They are present in the block at the coordinates where they lived. This changes the emotional relationship to death in a specific way. The grief of losing someone is grief about the future, the experiences you will not share, the conversations that will not happen, the ongoing relationship that has been severed. The block universe does not heal this grief because the future experiences that are now missing are genuinely absent from the block. Your world line will continue, and the coordinates that might have been shared with the person you lost will not be shared with them. That is a real loss, a real absence of events that will not occur. But the grief is not about the past. The past events, the life you shared with the person who has died, are not gone. They are in the block, permanent and real. The love that existed, the connection that was built, the experiences that were shared are features of the space-time structure of the universe. They happened. They are there. Nothing can make them not have happened. The block universe gives the past a permanence that the standard picture of time does not. In the standard picture, the past has ceased to exist. The experiences of a life that is over are gone, accessible only through memory, which is imperfect and fades. In the block universe, the past is not gone. It is there at its coordinates, as real as anything in the universe. Memory is not the only way the past persists. It persists in the physical structure of space-time itself. This is the difference that the block universe makes for the question of death. Not the survival of consciousness, not the continuation of experience, but the permanence of the events that constituted a life. The life that was lived is not erased by the death that ends it. It is fixed in the block, permanent and real, as much a part of the universe as the galaxies and stars. Let me now address the question of personal identity over time, because it is closely connected to the block universe's treatment of death, and because its implications are not fully appreciated in popular discussions. This is also where the block universe picture adds something genuinely new to some of the oldest philosophical debates about selfhood and continuity. Who are you? The question seems to have an obvious answer. You are the person currently reading these words, the person who woke up this morning, the person who has the memories, habits, and relationships that constitute your life. But the physics and philosophy of the situation are more subtle than this. The atoms in your body are not the same atoms they were 10 years ago. The rate of atomic turnover varies by tissue. Atoms in bone calcium are replaced over roughly a decade. Atoms in soft tissue over months. Atoms in red blood cells over about 4 months. The neurons of your central nervous system are largely not replaced. But the synaptic connections between them, the pattern of connectivity that encodes your memories, beliefs, and personality, changes continuously. New connections form as you learn and experience. Old connections are pruned as memories fade or are superseded. In philosophy, This is called the problem of personal identity over time. The debate has been ongoing since Locke in the 17th century. John Locke argued that personal identity consists in the continuity of consciousness and memory. David Hume offered a more radical view. There is no persistent self, only a bundle of perceptions with no underlying subject that persists between them. Derek Parfit, in his 1984 book, Reasons and Persons, argued that what matters in personal identity is not strict identity, but psychological continuity and connectedness, and that personal identity is not what matters in survival. The block universe picture provides a different and complementary angle. In the block universe, a person is a world line, a continuous curve in the four-dimensional space-time manifold passing through the events of their life from birth to death. The world line is continuous because the physical processes that constitute the person, the biological processes that maintain the body, and the neural processes that maintain memory and personality form a causally connected chain. Each event on the world line is causally connected to the preceding and subsequent events on the same world line. The you of a decade ago and the you of today are not two separate people who happen to share memories. They are 2 points on the same world line, connected by the continuous causal chain of physical processes that constitute your life. The world line is what constitutes personal identity, not the persistence of a specific physical substance, not the unbroken chain of memories, but the continuous causal connection of events in the space-time block. This worldline view of personal identity has specific implications for death. Death, in the worldline picture, is the endpoint of the worldline. The causal chain that connects events on the worldline is terminated at death. After death, no new events are added to the worldline. The worldline is complete at the moment of death. Both that this is a real feature of the space-time block. It is a curve in the four-dimensional manifold from birth to death, with every event on it permanently fixed at its space-time coordinates. The person, understood as the world line, does not cease to exist when the world line is completed. The world line persists in the block. It is there at its space-time coordinates, as real as any other feature of the space-time structure. Death does not remove the person from the block. It completes the world line. The completed world line is a permanent feature of the block. The person as the world line is permanently in the universe at their space-time coordinates from birth to death. The 12 principles in my book address exactly this, the relationship between the physics of space-time and the way we understand identity, continuity, and the end of life. Ready to change how you see the world? Get 12 principles for understanding the fabric of reality at realityprinciples.com. The you of 10 years ago was a physically different configuration of matter. The atoms in your body are mostly replaced on timescales of months to years. The pattern of neural connections in your brain has changed. Your memories, beliefs, and values have evolved. In what sense is the you of 10 years ago the same person as the you of today? In philosophy, this is called the problem of personal identity over time. The standard accounts of personal identity include the psychological continuity view, in which the same person persists through time because of the continuity of memory, personality, and psychological connections, and the physical continuity view, in which the same person persists through time because of the continuity of the physical body. Both views have difficulties. The psychological continuity view has trouble with cases of radical personality change, amnesia, and the gradual replacement of memories. The physical continuity view has trouble with the continuous replacement of atoms and the lack of a specific physical boundary that defines the person. The block universe picture offers a different perspective on personal identity. In the block universe, personal identity is not a matter of a single thing persisting through time. It is a matter of a world line connecting events. You are a world line, a curve in the four-dimensional space-time block passing through the events of your birth, your childhood, your adolescence, your adult life, and eventually your death. The world line is a continuous curve connected by the causal processes of biological development and neural continuity. The you of 10 years ago is not a different person who happens to share memories with the you of today. The you of 10 years ago is an earlier point on the same world line. The world line is continuous, and the continuity of the world line is what constitutes personal identity over time. Not the persistence of a specific physical substance, not the unbroken chain of psychological memories, but the continuous causal connection between events along a single world line in the space-time block. This has a specific implication for death. If you are a world line, then death is the endpoint of your world line. Beyond the point of death, your world line does not continue. The events that occur after your death are not events on your world line. They are events on other world lines, in the same space-time block, but not connected to yours by the continuous causal chain that constitutes personal identity. But the world line that has been traversed is real. The world line that ends at death is not erased by the death that terminates it. It is a complete curve in the block from birth to death, and every point on that curve is a real event in the universe. The world line persists in the block. The person, understood as the world line, persists in the block. The you of today is a specific point on the world line. The you of yesterday is another point earlier on the same world line. The you of the moment of your death will be the last point on the world line. And all of these points are equally real in the block universe, including the last one. Death in the block universe does not remove the world line. It ends its extension into the future. The 12 principles in my book address exactly this: the relationship between the physics of space-time and the way we understand identity, continuity, and the end of life. What relativity actually says about death is specific and precise, and it is different from what most people assume. Ready to change how you see the world? Get 12 principles for understanding the fabric of reality at realityprinciples.com. Let me now address the question of what death means for the experience of the dying person, as distinct from the question of what death means for the universe's physical structure. This is where the block universe connects most directly to the oldest philosophical traditions about mortality. Epicurus, the Greek philosopher who lived from 341 to 270 BCE, offered what remains one of the most compact and philosophically powerful arguments about death. Death is nothing to us, for when we are, death has not come, and when death has come, we are not. The argument is symmetric with respect to prenatal non-existence. We do not grieve for the infinite time before our birth, when we also did not exist. Why should we grieve for the equally infinite time after our death? The Epicurean argument is often dismissed as cold comfort. There is a specific philosophical objection raised by Thomas Nagel and elaborated by others. Death is bad, not because of what the dead experience, but because of what they are deprived of. The dead do not experience anything, but they are deprived of the future experiences they would have had if they had continued to live. This deprivation is bad, even if it is not experienced as bad. The block universe picture has something specific to add to both sides of this debate. On the Epicurean side, the block universe confirms the argument that being dead is not experienced as bad. Death is not a state that is experienced. It is the absence of experience. There is no subject who is dead and who is having the experience of death. The subject, the experiencer, is the world line, and the world line ends at death. When death has come, we are not is confirmed by the block universe. After the endpoint of the world line, there are no further events on the world line and therefore no further experiences. On the deprivationist side, the block universe also confirms that death involves a genuine loss. The coordinates in the space-time block that would have been occupied by the future experiences of the person who died are empty. The life that might have continued does not continue. This is a real absence, a genuine absence of events that might have been. But the block universe adds something that neither tradition fully captures: the permanence of the past. The events that did occur are not gone. They are in the block at their space-time coordinates, as real as any other events. Death ends the accumulation of new experience, but does not destroy the experience that is accumulated. The life that was lived is in the block. Every experience, every moment of consciousness, every perception of beauty, and every experience of love, and every moment of understanding is there at its space-time coordinates. These events are not accessible to anyone now. They cannot be relived. They are not currently being experienced. But they are real features of the universe, as real as the galaxies and stars permanently inscribed in the space-time structure. From the perspective of the block universe, the dying person's experience is a series of events on their world line. The last of these events is the last moment of consciousness, the moment at which the neural processes that produce experience are definitively terminated. After this moment, the world line does not continue. There are no more events on the world line to experience. The question, what is it like to be dead, is therefore not a question that has a meaningful answer. Because being dead is not a state that is experienced. It is the absence of experience, not a particular kind of experience. There is no subject who is dead and who is having the experience of death. The subject, the experiencer, is the world line, and the world line ends at death. This is the Epicurean point, stated by Epicurus in the 3rd century BCE. Death is nothing to us, for when we are, death has not come, and when death has come, we are not. The block universe gives this point a precise physical meaning. When you are, death has not come means that your world line has not yet reached its endpoint, and you are at a point on the world line where experience is occurring. When death has come, we are not means that the world line has reached its endpoint, and there is no longer a point on the world line at which experience is occurring. The Epicurean point is often dismissed as cold comfort. It tells you that the state of being dead is not unpleasant, which is true, but it does not address the loss of future experience that death represents. The block universe picture adds something to the Epicurean point. Not just that being dead is not unpleasant, but that the life that was lived is not made unreal by the death that terminates it. The experiences that occurred are in the block, permanent and real. Death ends the accumulation of new experience, but does not destroy the experience that has accumulated. There is a specific philosophical question about whether the permanence of the past in the block universe should actually matter to us. The philosopher Derek Parfit, in his book Reasons and Persons, argued that what matters in survival is not strict personal identity, but psychological continuity and connectedness. If what matters is psychological continuity, then the permanence of past events in the block universe might not provide the consolation that I am suggesting. I think Parfit's point is important, but I think the block universe adds something that Parfit's framework does not fully capture. The permanence of the past in the block universe is not just a claim about psychological continuity. It is a claim about the physical structure of reality. The events of a life that is ended are not gone from the universe. They are there, in the block, at their space-time coordinates. This is a fact about the universe, not a fact about psychology or memory. It says that the universe, right now, contains the events of lives that are over. The life that ended is still present in the physical structure of the cosmos. Whether this fact should matter to the person who has died or to the people who love them is a question that has both philosophical and emotional dimensions. Philosophically, one might argue that the only thing that matters is the experience of the events, and since the experience is over, the permanence of the events in the block is of no relevance to the person who is gone. But I think this argument misses something important about what it means for events to be real. The events of a life are real features of the universe. They occurred, they are there. The love that was felt, the beauty that was perceived, the understanding that was achieved, are features of the space-time structure of the universe, not mere psychological states that vanished when the brain that produced them stopped functioning. The universe, in the block picture, is richer for containing those events, and that richness is not diminished by the end of the world line that produced them. This is a different kind of permanence from what religious traditions typically promise. It is not the persistence of consciousness, not the continuation of experience, not the reunion of loved ones in an afterlife. It is the permanence of events in the physical structure of space-time, which is something that physics can say and which traditional religious frameworks often do not address. I am not suggesting that this physical permanence should be adequate consolation for the grief of loss. Grief is about the future, about the experiences that will not be shared, and the block universe does not provide those missing future experiences. But alongside the grief, there is something in the block universe picture that deserves recognition. The life that ended is not gone from the universe. It is there in the block, as real as anything that currently exists. Let me now address something that sits at the boundary of physics and neuroscience, because the claim that consciousness ends at death depends on assumptions about the relationship between neural processes and subjective experience that deserve careful treatment. The standard scientific position is that consciousness is produced by neural processes in the brain. When those neural processes are irreversibly terminated, consciousness ends. This position is supported by extensive evidence. Every known modification of the brain, from chemical anesthesia to physical damage to electrical stimulation, produces predictable modifications of consciousness. The detailed correspondence between brain regions, neural activity patterns, and specific contents of consciousness established through neuroimaging and lesion studies strongly suggests that consciousness is produced by and dependent on neural activity. But there is what David Chalmers has called the hard problem of consciousness. Why do physical processes give rise to subjective experience at all? Why is there something it is like to be a conscious creature rather than a system that processes information purely mechanically? This question remains genuinely open. The easier problems of explaining how the brain processes information, integrates sensory inputs, and controls behavior are being progressively solved by neuroscience. The hard problem is not. The block universe is agnostic about the hard problem. Whether subjective experience is identical to neural processes, supervenes on them, or has a more complex relationship to them, the block universe says the same thing. The events of conscious experience are events in the space-time manifold at the coordinates where they occurred. They are there in the block permanently. This agnosticism matters because it means the block universe's claim about the permanence of the past does not depend on a specific theory of consciousness. Whatever consciousness is, and however it relates to neural processes, the events associated with consciousness are events in the block. The permanence of those events is a consequence of the geometry of space-time, not of a specific theory of the mind. The phenomenon of near-death experience is the tunnel, the light, the life review reported by patients resuscitated from cardiac arrest does not change the block universe picture in any direction. If these experiences are produced by the brain during oxygen deprivation before death, they are events on the world line in the block. If they represent something more, the block accommodates that equally. The block universe makes no specific claim about what happens at the end of the world line beyond the fact that the world line ends. Let me now develop what the block universe means specifically for grief. When someone we love dies, grief has several distinct components. The acute pain of absence, the visceral experience of their not being there now and not being there in the future. This component is about the present and the future, and the block universe does not address it. The absence in the present is real. The absence in the future is real. The anticipatory component, all the things you were going to do together that will now not happen. The plans, the conversations, the milestones. This is entirely about the future, and the block universe confirms the reality of this loss. Those future coordinates are empty. And then there is what I would call retrospective grief. The sense that the shared experiences are now lost, that the love that existed is somehow diminished by the death that ended it, that the person you loved is gone from the universe entirely. This component of grief is sometimes expressed as if the past itself has been taken. This third component is specifically what the block universe addresses. The love that existed, the experiences that were shared, the connection that was built are events in the space-time block at the coordinates where they occurred. They are not lost. They are there in the block as real as they were when they were occurring. The death of the person does not retroactively diminish or erase the events of the relationship. Those events are fixed in the block. The grief of losing someone is appropriate and real, but one specific component of grief, the sense that what was shared has now disappeared from reality, is based on a mistaken picture of how the universe works. The past does not disappear when someone dies. The past is in the block. The relationship, the love, the shared experiences are features of the space-time structure of the universe, permanent and real. I want to be careful about what I am and am not claiming. I am not claiming that understanding the block universe will make grief less painful. Grief is painful and appropriately so. I am claiming that a specific metaphysical component of grief, the sense that the dead person has been annihilated from the universe, is not what physics describes. The life that ended is not gone from the universe. It is there, in the block, as real as anything that exists. Let me now address something that deepens the block universe picture of death even further. The relationship between the permanence of the past in space-time and the concept of information in physics. In physics, information has a specific and technical meaning. The information content of a physical state is the complete description of that state. The positions, velocities, and quantum states of all the particles that constitute the system. The information is encoded in the physical state, and the laws of physics at the fundamental level are information preserving. If you know the complete state of the universe at one time, you can, in principle, reconstruct the complete state at any other time, forward or backward. This is the principle of unitarity in quantum mechanics. The quantum state of a closed system evolves unitarily, meaning that information is neither created nor destroyed. The total information content of the universe is constant. What changes over time is the arrangement and distribution of that information among the degrees of freedom of the universe. In the block universe, every event is a real feature of the space-time manifold. The information about what occurred at each space-time coordinate is encoded in the physical state at that coordinate. The events of a life encoded in the specific physical configurations that constituted the brain and body and immediate environment at each moment are features of the space-time block at their coordinates. In principle, if you had perfect knowledge of the physical laws and perfect measurement of the current state of the universe, you could in principle reconstruct the events of any past time working backward from the current state. The laws of physics are time reversible at the fundamental level, and the information is preserved. In principle, the events of any past life are recoverable, in principle, from the current state of the universe by applying the time-reversed equations of physics. This is, of course, absurdly impractical. The number of degrees of freedom in the universe is roughly 10 to the 80. Tracking and computing with 10 to the 80 degrees of freedom is not something that any technology we can imagine could achieve. The reconstruction of the events of a past life from the current state of the universe is a theoretical, in-principle possibility that has no practical meaning. But the in-principle possibility points to something important about the relationship between the past and the present. The past is not only in the block as a geometric feature of the space-time manifold. It is also encoded in the current state of the universe, in the sense that the current state carries, in principle, all the information about the past state. The events of every life that has been lived are, in principle, recoverable from the current physical state of the universe. This is connected to the block universe picture, but is not the same claim. The block universe says the past events are in the space-time manifold at their coordinates. The information preservation principle says the past events are encoded in the current state of the universe. Both claims support the same conclusion. The past is not lost. It is present in the universe, either as a geometric feature of the space-time block or as information encoded in the current physical state. The black hole information paradox that I described in the universe's final secret video is relevant here. If black holes evaporate through Hawking radiation and the radiation is truly thermal, containing no information about what fell in, then information is lost. The state of the infalling matter cannot be reconstructed from the outgoing radiation. This would be a violation of unitarity, of the principle that information is preserved. The resolution of the information paradox through the island formula and the page curve preserves unitarity. The information about the infalling matter is eventually encoded in the correlations of the outgoing Hawking radiation in a highly scrambled form. Information is preserved. The past, in this specific sense, is permanently encoded in the state of the universe even after the black hole has evaporated. For the events of human lives, no comparable information scrambling mechanism operates on the relevant timescales. The information about the specific neural patterns that constituted the experiences of a person's life is rapidly dispersed into the environment after death through the biological processes of decomposition and through the physical interactions of the dispersed molecules with their surroundings. The specific information is not accessible in practice, but it is not destroyed. It is encoded in the physical state of the universe, scrambled and distributed across an enormous number of degrees of freedom, but in principle recoverable by the application of the time-reversed physical laws. The past, in this information theoretic sense, is permanent. The events of lives that have ended are encoded in the universe, scrambled but not erased. This information theoretic permanence adds a layer to the block universe picture. The past is not only permanent in the geometric sense of the space-time manifold, it is also permanent in the information theoretic sense of the physical state of the universe. Both senses of permanence support the conclusion that the lives of the dead are not erased from the universe. They are there in the block, and they are encoded in the state of the universe that continues after their death. Now, let me address one more dimension of what the block universe says about death. What it means for the deaths of people who left something behind. Every person who has ever lived left effects on the world. Some left biological descendants, others did not. Some left intellectual contributions, works of art, scientific discoveries, cultural practices. Some left memories in the minds of others who knew them. Some left nothing that persists in accessible form. In the standard picture of time, the effects of a person's life persist after their death, but the person does not. The causal consequences ripple forward through history, but the person who caused them is gone. In the block universe picture, both the causal consequences and the person are real features of the universe. The person, as the world line, is in the block at their space-time coordinates. The causal consequences, as later events on other world lines that were causally influenced by events on the deceased person's world line, are in the block at their space-time coordinates. Both are there. The person and their legacy are both real features of the space-time structure. This does not change the practical situation. You cannot communicate with someone who has died. You cannot visit the space-time coordinates of their life. You cannot experience the events that occurred on their world line. But it does say that both they and their effects are in the block. The universe is richer for containing both. Tolstoy, in his novella The Death of Ivan Ilyich, has his dying character reach a moment of recognition that the way he has lived has been wrong. Too concerned with social appearance and too disconnected from genuine human connection. In his final hours, Ivan Ilyich comes to understand what might have constituted a genuine life, a life of authentic connection rather than social performance. The block universe picture gives this moment of recognition a physical dimension. Ivan Ilyich's life, as he has lived it, is already in the block at its space-time coordinates. The moment of recognition is itself in the block. Whether the insight changes anything practical depends on whether there is time and capacity for genuine connection before the world line ends. But the recognition itself, the moment of understanding what might have been lived differently, is there in the block, permanent and real. The question the block universe does not answer is whether the recognition arrives in time to change the character of what is added to the block before the world line ends. That is not a physics question. It is a question about the urgency and the use of the time that remains. Death may be a misunderstanding in the following precise sense. The picture of death as the annihilation of a person from the universe is not what the physics of space-time describes. Physics describes the termination of a world line, which is different from the erasure of the world line. The person, understood as the world line, is not annihilated. They are in the block, permanent and real, from birth to death, at their space-time coordinates. The events of the life that was lived are in the universe, as real as the galaxies and the stars, and nothing that follows can change this. Death ends the extension of the world line. It does not erase what has been extended. The fear of death has 4 distinct components, and I want to address them precisely. The first is the fear of the process of dying. Dying can involve suffering, loss of function, loss of autonomy, the distress of terminal illness, the gradual reduction of capacity and connection. This fear is not addressed by the block universe. The process of dying is real and can be genuinely terrible. The events of dying are in the block at their space-time coordinates with the same status as any other events. The block universe does not make suffering less real or less significant. It does not sanitize the physical reality of dying. The second is the fear of the unknown. Physics does not tell us whether consciousness survives the death of the brain. The block universe tells us that the events of consciousness are real features of the space-time manifold while they are occurring. What happens to the experiencer when the events stop is genuinely unknown. The block universe does not answer this question. The third is the fear of lost future experience. This fear is appropriate. The future experiences that death forecloses are genuinely absent from the block. If your world line ends at 60, the experiences that would have occurred at 70, 80, and 90 are absent. This is a real loss that the block universe confirms rather than denies. The fourth is the extinction fear, the dread of one's own non-existence, the specific anxiety that I will cease to exist, that the self that is currently experiencing will be annihilated. This is the component that the block universe most directly addresses. The extinction fear rests on the picture of death as annihilation. The person who currently exists will, at death, be removed from the universe entirely. In the block universe, this is not what happens. The person, understood as the world line, is not removed from the universe by death. The world line ends its extension into the future. No new events are added, but the world line that has been traversed remains in the block as real as ever at every space-time coordinate it passed through. The you who is currently living and experiencing will not be annihilated from the universe by death. You will be in the block at your space-time coordinates permanently from your birth to your death at every moment in between. What is lost at death is not your existence but your ongoing experience. Your world line ends, which means that no new experiences are added to your portion of the block. But the experiences that have been added are not subtracted. They are there. Right now, as you read these words, the space-time block contains every moment of your life that you have already lived at its specific coordinates, just as real as this moment. And when your world line eventually ends, the block will contain every moment of your entire life at its specific coordinates, just as real as this moment is now. This is the specific difference between the standard picture of death and the block universe picture of death. The standard picture, a person exists and then is annihilated. The block universe picture, A worldline extends and then stops extending. The extension stops, but the worldline does not cease to exist. It is there in the block, complete from birth to death permanently. Let me now turn to some of the other great philosophical traditions that have addressed death and see where the block universe fits within them, because I think the comparison is illuminating. The Stoic tradition, particularly as articulated by Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, emphasized the acceptance of death as a natural part of the cosmic order. For the Stoics, death was not to be feared because it was merely the dissolution of the arrangement of matter and spirit that constituted a person. The atoms would be dispersed and recombined. What mattered was living virtuously during the interval of life, because virtue was the only good and was entirely within one's own control. The block universe picture shares something with the Stoic view. Both treat death as the natural endpoint of a process rather than as a catastrophic annihilation. The block universe adds something the Stoics did not have, a specific account of why the past is not gone. For the Stoics, the past was ephemeral, dispersed into the flow of time. For the block universe, the past is permanent, inscribed at its space-time coordinates. The Buddhist tradition emphasizes impermanence. All phenomena are impermanent, including the self, and suffering arises from clinging to things as if they were permanent. Death is the most dramatic example of impermanence, the dissolution of the configuration that constitutes a person. The Buddhist path involves releasing attachment to permanence and accepting the flowing, momentary nature of all phenomena. The block universe picture is in an interesting tension with the Buddhist emphasis on impermanence. The block universe says that the past is permanent. The events of past lives are fixed in the space-time structure. This permanence might seem to contradict the Buddhist teaching of impermanence, but I think the tension is less sharp than it appears. The Buddhist teaching of impermanence is about phenomena as experienced. No experience is permanent. Every moment passes. The block universe's permanence is about the structure of space-time. The events, once they have occurred, are fixed at their coordinates. These are claims about different things. The Buddhist emphasis on releasing attachment might be compatible with the block universe picture. You do not cling to past experiences as if they were currently happening, because they are not currently happening. They are at their past coordinates. But the past experiences are real features of the universe, as real as the present. Whether this should change the relationship to attachment is a question for Buddhist practice to address. The Jewish and Christian traditions have historically emphasized the resurrection of the body and the continued existence of the person after death in a transformed state. These traditions make specific theological claims about consciousness and continuity beyond death that physics cannot confirm or deny. The block universe is agnostic with respect to these claims. What the block universe does share with these traditions is the conviction that the events of a life are not simply lost. These traditions say that the life that was lived matters permanently, that the acts of love and justice and understanding that occurred in a life are not simply dissolved into nothing. The block universe says this in a specific physical way. The events of the life are in the space-time block, permanent and real. Whether this physical permanence connects to the theological permanence that these traditions affirm is a question that sits at the boundary of physics and theology. The existentialist tradition, particularly Heidegger's analysis of being toward death, holds that the recognition of one's own mortality is the condition for authentic existence. Being toward death, the awareness that one's existence is finite and will end, is what gives the present moment its urgency and its depth. Without the awareness of death, existence would be inauthentic, absorbed in the everyday without confronting the finitude that makes each moment matter. The block universe is deeply consonant with the existentialist analysis. In the block universe, the finite extent of the worldline is what gives each moment its significance. The present moment is significant because it will become a permanent feature of the block, What happens now will be there in the block for the duration of the universe. The awareness that the worldline is finite, that the extension will eventually stop, gives the present moment a specific urgency that would be absent from an infinite worldline. Heidegger's being toward death finds a physical analog in the block universe. The finitude of the worldline is the condition for the significance of each moment on the worldline. The permanent record that each moment adds to the block is what makes each moment matter. Death, understood as the endpoint of the worldline, is not the negation of life, but the frame that gives life its shape and its meaning. Let me close with what I think is the most important implication of all this for how we actually live day to day. If the events of your life are permanently fixed in the space-time block, then what you do in your life is permanent in a specific and physical sense. The experiences you create, the love you express, the understanding you achieve, the beauty you perceive and share are all events in the space-time block. They are not going to be erased. They are not going to fade away. They are in the block permanently at the space-time coordinates where they occurred. This creates a specific relationship to the present moment. The present moment, the events that are occurring right now on your world line, will become part of the permanent record of the block. What happens now will be there in the block for as long as the block exists. The quality of the experiences you are having now, the choices you are making, the care you are putting into what you do, all of this will be a permanent feature of the universe. This is not a call to anxiety about the permanence of mistakes. The block universe does not judge. It contains what occurred. The events of your life, including the choices you regret, are in the block. But so are the events of every moment of genuine connection, understanding, beauty, and love. All of it is there. The permanence of the block, combined with the finite extent of any individual world line, gives the present moment a specific character that I find both sobering and liberating. You are at a specific location on your world line right now, adding to the portion of the block that will constitute your life. The events that are occurring right now are being fixed in the block. They will be part of the permanent record. And the world line that is being extended right now will, at some point, end. The extension is finite. The permanence is not. Every moment of life is a moment of adding to the permanent portion of the block that constitutes a life. And the end of the extension does not diminish what has been added. This is what the block universe says about death. Not consolation about an afterlife, not the promise of reunion, not the survival of consciousness beyond the body, but a specific and precise reconception of what it means for events to exist and what it means for a person to cease to exist. The person, understood as the world line, ceases to extend at death. The person, understood as the complete set of events on the world line, does not cease to exist. They are in the block, permanent and real, from birth to death. Death may be a misunderstanding, not in the sense that it is not real, not in the sense that it does not involve genuine loss, but in the sense that the standard picture of it as the complete removal of a person from the universe is not what the physics of space-time describes. In the block universe, death is the end of a world line, not the erasure of what the world line traversed. The person remains in the block. The life that was lived remains in the universe. And nothing that follows can change this. The universe does not forget, because forgetting would require the past to be removed from the block, and the physics of space-time does not allow this. Every moment of genuine understanding, every act of love, every experience of beauty, every moment of connection between people who will not always be alive is permanently inscribed in the space-time structure of the universe. Death ends the inscription. It does not erase what has been inscribed. The 12 principles I've assembled for understanding the fabric of reality are ultimately about exactly this kind of engagement with what physics actually says about our deepest questions. Ready to change how you see the world? Get 12 principles for understanding the fabric of reality at realityprinciples.com. What does it mean to you that the events of your life are permanent features of the space-time block? Tell me in the comments. If this changed how you think about death and what it means for the events of a life to persist in the space-time block, if the block universe picture looks different now as a framework for understanding not just physics, but mortality and meaning, tell me in the comments. Tell me whether the permanence of the past in the block universe changes how you relate to the deaths of people you have loved. Tell me whether the idea that death ends a world line rather than annihilates a person makes the question of mortality feel different to you. And subscribe if you want to keep going into the places where the physics of the universe meets the most fundamental questions about what it means to be alive within it and what it means to die. There is the fear of the process of dying, which can involve suffering and loss of function. There is the fear of the unknown, the uncertainty about what, if anything, follows death. There is the fear of loss, the loss of future experiences, relationships, and possibilities. And there is what philosophers call the extinction fear, the dread of one's own non-existence, the sense that I will no longer be here. The block universe picture has something specific to say about each of these. The fear of the process of dying is not addressed by the block universe. The process of dying can indeed involve suffering, and suffering is real at the space-time coordinates where it occurs. The block universe does not make suffering less real or less significant. The events of dying are in the block with the same ontological status as any other events. The block universe picture does not sanitize the physical reality of dying. The fear of the unknown is partially addressed by the block universe. The uncertainty about what follows death is genuine. Physics does not tell us whether consciousness survives the death of the brain. The block universe tells us that the events of consciousness, while occurring, are real features of the space-time structure. What happens to those events after the world line ends, in the sense of whether consciousness somehow continues, is not a question the block universe answers. The fear of loss of future experiences is not resolved by the block universe. The future experiences that death forecloses are genuinely absent from the block. If your world line ends at 60, the events that would have occurred at 70, 80, and 90 are absent. This is a real absence. The block universe confirms it rather than denying it. The loss of future experience is genuine. The extinction fear, the dread of one's own non-existence, is the fear that the block universe most directly addresses. The extinction fear rests on the implicit assumption that the person who currently exists will, at death, be annihilated from the universe. In the block universe, this is not what happens. The person, understood as the world line, is not annihilated. The world line ends its extension, but the portion of the world line that has been traversed remains in the block, as real as ever. The you who is currently living and experiencing will not be removed from the universe by death. You will be in the block at your space-time coordinates permanently. What is lost at death is not your existence, but your ongoing experience. Your world line ends, which means that no new experiences are added to your portion of the block. But the experiences that have been added are not subtracted. They are there. This is the specific claim that I want to make carefully and precisely. Death does not erase a life. It terminates a world line. The events of the life that was lived are in the block universe, permanent and real, not subject to removal or erasation by the death that ends the world line. The universe, understood as the complete four-dimensional space-time block, contains your entire life, including all its experiences, right up to and including the moment of death. And it will continue to contain those events permanently for as long as the universe exists. Whether the universe itself will last forever is a separate question connected to the far future of cosmology that I described in the 2 trillion galaxies video. On cosmological timescales, the sun will exhaust its fuel and expand. The Milky Way and Andromeda will merge. Eventually, if the cosmological constant persists, all structure will decay into a cold, dark, expanding void. Whether the block universe picture survives the end of structure, whether space-time itself persists even when the matter within it has decayed, is a question that connects to quantum gravity and the deepest questions about the nature of time and existence. But on any time scale relevant to human life and human history, the events of lives that have been lived are features of the space-time block that are not going away. The block is not being erased by the passage of time. It is not changing. It is the complete structure of space-time, containing all events at all coordinates, and the coordinates of lives that have ended are as much a part of that structure as any other coordinates. Let me now address what the block universe perspective on death means for how we live, not just how we understand death abstractly. If the events of your life are permanently fixed in the space-time block, then what you do in your life is permanent in a specific and physical sense. The experiences you create, the love you express, the understanding you achieve, the beauty you perceive and share are all events in the space-time block. They are not going to be erased. They are not going to fade away. They are in the block permanently at the space-time coordinates where they occurred. This creates a specific relationship to the present moment. The present moment, the events that are occurring right now on your world line, will become part of the permanent record of the block. What happens now will be there in the block forever. The quality of the experiences you are having now, the choices you are making, the care you are putting into what you do, all of this will be a permanent feature of the universe. This is not a call to anxiety about the permanence of mistakes. The block universe does not judge. It contains what occurred, not what might have occurred under different choices. The events of your life, including the choices you regret and the actions you wish you had done differently, are in the block. But so are the events of every moment of genuine connection, understanding, beauty, and love. All of it is there. The permanence of the block, combined with the finite extent of any individual world line, gives the present moment a specific and important character. You are at a specific location on your world line right now, adding to the portion of the block that will constitute your life. The events that are occurring right now are being fixed in the block. They will be part of the permanent record. And the world line that is being extended right now will at some point end. The extension is finite. The permanence is not. This is what the block universe says about death and about life in the context of death. Death is the end of the world line's extension. Life is the extension of the world line through the space-time block. Every moment of life is a moment of adding to the permanent portion of the block that constitutes a life. And the end of the extension does not diminish what has been added. I want to be clear about what I am not claiming. I am not claiming that the permanence of the past in the block universe provides a reason not to grieve. Grief is appropriate. The loss of future experience, the severing of ongoing relationships, the absence of a person from the remaining events of your world line is a genuine loss. The block universe does not resolve grief by pointing out that the past is permanent. Grief is about the future, not the past. I am claiming something more specific, that the standard picture of death as annihilation, as the removal of a person from the universe, is not what physics describes. Physics describes the end of a world line, which is different from the annihilation of what has occurred. The life that was lived is not gone from the universe. It is there, in the block, as real as anything that exists. This is the truth about death that relativity actually provides. Not consolation about an afterlife, not the promise of reunion, not the survival of consciousness beyond the body, but a specific and precise reconception of what it means for events to exist and what it means for a person to cease to exist. The person, understood as the world line, ceases to extend at death. The person, understood as the complete set of events on the world line, does not cease to exist. They are in the block, permanent and real. What that means for how you live, how you relate to your own mortality, how you understand the deaths of people you have loved, is a question that physics hands to you. The physics describes the structure, The meaning is yours to make within that structure. There is a phrase attributed to various thinkers across multiple traditions. To live well is to die well. The block universe gives this phrase a specific physical interpretation. To live well in the block universe is to add to the permanent record of the block the events of a life well lived. The events that you create in the time your world line extends are the contribution you make to the permanent structure of space-time. They will be there in the block long after your world line has ended. The universe does not forget. It cannot forget, because forgetting would require the past to be removed from the block, which the physics of space-time does not allow. Every moment of genuine understanding, every act of love, every experience of beauty, every moment of connection is permanently inscribed in the space-time structure of the universe. Death ends the inscription. It does not erase what has been inscribed. The 12 principles I have assembled for understanding the fabric of reality are ultimately about exactly this. What the physics of the universe tells us about how to live within it, how to understand what is real and what is permanent, and how to find meaning in a cosmos whose physical structure is more strange and more complete than everyday experience suggests. Ready to change how you see the world? Get 12 principles for understanding the fabric of reality at realityprinciples.com. What does it mean to you that the events of your life are permanent features of the space-time block? Tell me in the comments. If this changed how you think about death and what it means for the events of a life to persist in the space-time block, if the block universe picture looks different now as a framework for understanding not just physics but mortality and meaning, tell me in the comments. Tell me whether the permanence of the past in the block universe changes how you relate to the deaths of people you have loved. Tell me whether the idea that death ends a world line rather than annihilates a person makes the question of mortality feel different to you. And subscribe if you want to keep going into the places where the physics of the universe meets the most fundamental questions about what it means to be alive within it and what it means to die.